in areas where they have not had rain for a long period of time. 50 inches of rain is a lot of rain for the ground to absorb. So it's going to be a long time before the flood waters even begin to recede. But how do we win now those who are non-believers to the Lord through this tragedy? I was reading an article where someone was charging $100 for a case of water. And the Attorney General stepped in and says, there will be charges levied against persons who are gouging the prices of items. So the church now is in a place where we can say, let's see what we can do to evangelize this community during this tragedy.
Wow, I think that's a great comment, and I think that we need to do. I think the real issue of the church now is to become spiritual and not to become judgmental. We also need to become and bring our social issues together with things. Bishop Luter, I'm going to let you chime in here with us on this subject, because we're talking about what are people doing, how should people react. We're always going to have the naysayers and people saying, I saw an article this morning and I was looking at a clip on the news where people were indicting Joel Osteen's church for not doing nothing. But basically, his church couldn't get there no more than anybody else. The staff couldn't get there. It was flooded all around. But people always are trying to accuse people who are affluent, because it's almost like they think they're privileged enough to do something like they didn't get hit like everybody else. So I'm going to let you chime in here, Bishop Luter, and I want to mention this because your presiding bishop, Bishop Morton, went through this with Katrina in New Orleans, and you're probably more closer to this than we are in terms of that. So how should the church respond? We responded 5 years ago. What should we be thinking out today? Because we got some experience on this.
Thank you so much, Archbishop. Since the dawn of time, natural catastrophes and calamities have been a characteristic of the reality wherein we live. I think it is perhaps a mistake to try and over-spiritualize and to create and define every event in terms of the judgment of God. I think that this is indeed a natural catastrophe. I was very, very struck because I'm in revival this week, and I had several people come to me last night following the revival, asking me whether or not I thought that the recent eclipse of the sun had something to do with the overwhelming rains that are going on in Texas. I think there is an anxiousness on the part of people to connect dots where dots perhaps do not exist. I don't think, obviously, that this is a judgment of God, and I don't think that there is a connection between the recent lunar eclipse or solar eclipse and what's going on in Texas. I just think that nature is a powerful phenom in the world, and that we're going to see items such as this. And our response is to have empathy, to pray, and to do all that we can to reach out to those individuals who stand in need. You're absolutely right, Archbishop. The scenes that I have seen in Texas so remind me of Katrina. People walking down the street in life rafts and boats and just struggling to make it. We survived that situation. It created a great deal of suffering. And obviously, there's a great deal of suffering that's going on in the Houston and surrounding area now. I think our posture, I think that our position ought to be that of prayer, that we reach out with prayer, that we do all that we can do in a humanitarian kind of way, and not be apocalyptic or eschatological and suggest that this somehow signals the end of the world.
Well, Bishop Luter, I've been receiving a lot of those same calls and emails about what may be happening and what God is doing, and people seeing very apocalyptic by seeing the end of the world and other things that are going on. I agree with you. There have been natural catastrophes been happening since the world began. This is just a part of the natural order of things. The Lord had already said that things going to be out of order. These are maybe signs of the end times. As we look at nature, some of these things are more devastating, but let's remember that we've got more reporting tools today than we've had in any other time in history. And we don't know really a lot of things that weren't measured before science started measuring. We don't know how large they were or things that was going on because we didn't have these measuring tools. I mean, we've got tools that are tracking us now that tell us when storms are coming, anticipating how big it's going to be, talking about the level of the earthquakes that's going on. We didn't have these kind of warnings in the past. All we knew is that they were there and that they came up. But now we've got science. We've got tools that could tell us. The church could almost pray ahead of time for things that's going to happen instead of waiting until they happen and pray. I see it in terms of a positive that at least when we first heard about what was going to happen, the church should have immediately gone into prayer and about what was going to happen, the devastation that was going to hit. And sometimes we're not a people to pray the future a lot of times. We always want to pray the present. It's like we wait till things happen to us instead of worrying about trying to get things to happen for us. So Bishop Slater, where is the church's prophetic role in this? Shouldn't we be seeking God? God reveals things to his servants, and not necessarily that God maybe would have prophesied that there was going to be devastation in Houston, but aren't there things and warnings we should prepare for?